If you could, like, time travel,
Yeah.
just drop yourself directly into the late 2020s, what would you honestly expect to see?
Oh, I mean, we always expect the cinematic stuff, right? Like neon skies.
Yeah. Flying cars. I think we all kind of fully anticipated some version of, a sentient robot butler just handing us our morning coffee.
Right, because human nature just assumes that progress is going to be this loud, flashy parade of mind-bending disruptions.
Like the future has to announce itself every single time you walk out the front door.
Exactly. We want it to be overtly, aggressively futuristic.
But today, we're taking a deep dive into a very specific, totally real-world snapshot of that future.
Yeah, a much more grounded one.
Right. We've got our hands on this comprehensive news brief from the Daily Tech Reader, and it's dated Thursday, July 9, 2026.
Which is such an interesting time period to look at.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to synthesize this massive mountain of updates spanning global markets, enterprise technology, energy infrastructure, and everyday culture.
Trying to really understand the forces actually driving the global economy in the mid-2020s.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are sitting there expecting sci-fi fantasies, you are going to be a little disappointed.
A lot disappointed, probably.
Yeah, true. The overarching theme of this exact day in 2026 is definitely not flying cars. The most common phrases dominating all these sources we're looking at are things like disciplined execution and measurable business value.
It's very corporate.
Honestly, yeah. Reading this feels less like a sci-fi novel and way more like sitting in a very serious corporate board meeting.
It absolutely reads like a board meeting. But, there is a profound reason for that shift in tone.
Which is what?
Well, what we are looking at in these sources is the arrival of a really distinct era of operational maturity. Like, the hype cycle is officially over.
Right, that initial explosion of AI everywhere.
Yeah, that frantic, breathless period where every single company was just throwing, like, experimental ideas at the wall to see what would stick. That is done.
The wall is full.
The wall is full, and now someone has to clean it up. The world in the summer of 2026 is currently consumed by the hard, deeply unglamorous work of making all this next-generation technology reliable.
Reliable and what? Secure.
Secure and financially efficient. I mean, the market no longer cares what a technology could theoretically do in 10 years.
It results today.
Exactly. The only question being asked in these reports is, what is it reliably doing for our profit margins this afternoon?
Which brings us right to the absolute core of this 2026 economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Enterprise AI. And the shift here is just jarring.
It's a total 180.
Because if you look back just a couple of years prior to this snapshot, AI was a novelty. It was, something you used to generate weird pictures of astronauts riding horses.
Or having it write a funny poem for a coworker's birthday or something.
Right, exactly. But in this July 2026 briefing, AI sounds boring, and I actually mean that in the best possible way. It has just become everyday infrastructure.
Yeah, though I wouldn't even call it boring. I'd actually call it invisible.
Invisible, how so?
Think about indoor plumbing.
Okay.
You only ever really notice your plumbing when a pipe bursts, right? When it works perfectly, it just completely fades into the background of your life.
You just turn the tap and expect water.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we are seeing in these reports regarding AI. The sources explicitly point out that AI agents are actively expanding into core production workloads.
Let's break down that term production workloads for a second, because that sounds like pure corporate jargon. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Good point. So it means the AI is no longer operating in a sandbox or a test environment. A production workload is the live, beating heart of a company's operations.
Like the actual day-to-day systems.
Right. It's the real-time customer database, the live financial transaction ledger, the active supply chain routing system.
Stuff that absolutely can operate.
Exactly. If a production workload crashes, the company is immediately losing money. So moving AI into these live environments means it has finally achieved a level of trust and stability that just wasn't there before. It is running the main engine now.
Wow. And we are seeing that engine overhaul most clearly in software engineering, according to the brief. The sources mentioned that AI coding assistants aren't just helping out here and there. They are fundamentally reshaping the entire discipline of software development.
They're rewriting how we write code.
But how does that change the actual output of a company? Like, tangibly?
It changes the speed of innovation by totally lifting the baseline. When developers rely on these AI assistants to handle the tedious, routine, boilerplate coding,
Boring stuff.
right, the boring stuff, they aren't just saving an hour here or there, they are freeing up their cognitive load to solve really complex architectural problems.
So they can focus on the big picture.
Yes, you have single developers in 2026 producing the volume of work that honestly used to require a team of 5.
That's incredible. But the way companies are measuring the success of all this has shifted too, right?
Yeah.
Because they aren't just buying these AI systems to issue a press release saying, hey, look at us, we use AI.
Oh, not anymore. That PR stunt era is dead. What's fascinating here is, and this is key, how this shift impacts the psychology of corporate purchasing.
Okay, what are they looking for now?
The sources make it crystal clear. Productivity has become the absolute primary technology purchasing metric. Organizations are looking strictly at sheer productivity gains.
Just the hard numbers.
Right. When a company emphasizes operational maturity over reckless experimentation, they are actively choosing stability. The businesses that are winning in 2026 are practicing ruthless, disciplined capital allocation.
Meaning they aren't just throwing money around.
Exactly. They invest heavily, sure, but only where they can definitively prove a return on that investment.
And they were pushing this technology out of the central data centers and into the real world too. Like the sources heavily highlight the growth of edge computing.
Which is a massive shift.
Yeah, so my understanding of edge computing is that data gets processed locally, like right on your phone or on a factory floor sensor,
Right.
rather than beaming all the way back to some massive server farm halfway across the country. Is that right?
That's the essence of it, yeah. But the why is what really matters here.
Why do we need it at the edge?
Because of latency and bandwidth. Think about it. If you have an AI system monitoring a high-speed manufacturing line for microscopic defects,
Like tiny flaws in a microchip or something.
right, you cannot afford to wait the, 200 milliseconds it takes for the data to travel to a cloud server and back.
Because in that time, 50 broken chips just went down the line.
Exactly. The decision to halt the assembly line needs to happen in microseconds on the device itself.
That makes total sense. And the AI itself is changing shape to accommodate this. The brief mentions it's becoming highly multimodal, so it's handling text, vision, and audio all seamlessly.
Right, at the same time.
So we aren't just talking about typing into a text box on a screen anymore.
Exactly the opposite. When AI becomes multimodal, it essentially transitions from being a really smart search engine to being a digital employee.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because if an AI can watch a live video feed of a warehouse, listen to the audio of the machinery for abnormal grinding noises.
Oh, wow. Just listening to the machines.
Yeah, and then instantly cross-reference that sound against a 10,000-page maintenance manual. I mean, that is a fundamentally different economic tool.
Acting on the physical world.
Right. And that's why we see massive impacts in sectors like healthcare, where the sources note AI is actively driving forward drug discovery and assisting in highly complex precision diagnostics.
You know, reading through all this, it really reminds me of the historical adoption of electricity.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because when the light bulb was first introduced, people would pay money just to stand in a room and marvel at it glowing, like it was pure magic.
The novelty phase.
Right. But by the time you reach the 1920s or 30s, no one is just staring at a light bulb anymore. Instead, society was doing the really tedious, vital, dangerous work of laying copper wire across the entire continent.
Standardizing the voltage.
Exactly. Standardizing the voltage, writing building codes to make sure houses didn't just spontaneously burn down. And that's what this 2026 snapshot feels like. We've stopped staring at the glowing light bulb, and we're just standardizing the digital voltage to wire the whole economy.
That standardization analogy is perfect, especially when you bring up building codes. Because, wiring a house isn't just a technical challenge, it's a regulatory one.
Yeah, you need rules.
You can't safely standardize a massive new utility without oversight.
Which actually brings up a really fascinating archive post from our sources. There's a note from a few weeks prior, June Roan, 2026, pointing out that Florida became the first state to sue OpenAI over ChatGPT safety failures.
Right, the parallel evolution of governance.
Exactly. And now, obviously, we're looking at this purely from a neutral analytical standpoint. We aren't taking a side on the merits of that specific lawsuit. But it perfectly illustrates your point about building codes, right?
It really does. You cannot integrate a technology this deeply into the global economy without eventually colliding with legal, ethical, and safety boundaries.
It's inevitable.
Completely. The fact that state governments are actively litigating AI safety is a direct symptom of its integration. It is no longer just a novelty app on your phone. It is critical infrastructure.
And critical infrastructure gets regulated heavily.
Always.
So if all these companies are deploying AI agents across their entire software stack and governments are writing the regulations to govern it, what's stopping them from just scaling this to infinity? Because, I mean, software is famously infinitely scalable, right? You just copy and paste the code.
While software is infinitely scalable, the physical universe, however, is not.
Wow.
The real bottleneck they are hitting in 2026 is raw physical reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you can write the most elegant code in the world, but you absolutely cannot outcode thermodynamics.
No, you can't.
The power requirements outlined in this 2026 snapshot are just staggering. The sources explicitly state that AI data centers have become the primary drivers of long-term electricity demand.
And this shouldn't be surprising if we look at the mechanics of what we just discussed.
It's doing so much more.
Right. Multimodal AI, edge computing, continuous production workloads, all of that requires massive compute. Compute requires physical servers. Servers require massive data centers.
But data centers are just incredibly hungry.
They require an unbelievable amount of electricity, not just to run the chips, but to cool them down so they don't literally melt into slag.
Right. And let's look at the weather report included in this exact July 9th snapshot. We have hot summer conditions persisting in the southwest United States and warm, humid conditions blanketing the southeast.
Which means air conditioning.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, that spikes air conditioning use across millions of homes. So, if the grid is already sweating from just normal summer heat and you have these AI data centers pulling down gigawatts of power, are we sprinting toward a physical wall here? Is this incredibly advanced digital revolution actually at the mercy of concrete, copper, and old-school power lines?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is undeniably yes. The digital economy is currently heavily bound by physical limits.
So the tech world has to care about the physical grid now.
Very much so. That is precisely why the sources show utilities radically reshaping their long-term planning. Grid modernization and grid resilience are listed as massive nationwide investment priorities.
Because the AI is useless without the grid.
Exactly. You can possess the most sophisticated AI coding assistant on the planet, but if the local power transformer blows out, your AI is dead.
Wow. So how is the market responding to this? Like, how do you generate enough power to keep the AI humming without browning out major cities? Our sources show a very complex energy mix evolving in response to this crisis.
They are essentially throwing every known science at the problem. I mean, renewable energy investments and battery storage deployments remain very strong.
But renewables have a catch, right?
They do. Renewables like solar and wind are intermittent. They only produce when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. But a data center cannot be intermittent.
It can't just shut off when a cloud goes by.
Right. It requires what we call baseload power, which is massive, continuous, 247 uninterrupted electricity.
Which explains the huge resurgence of nuclear energy in these reports.
Exactly. We are seeing major renewed capital investment in traditional nuclear energy because it provides that stable baseload power without the carbon emissions.
But they're looking even further ahead, too.
Yeah, they're also looking further down the road. The sources note steady momentum in fusion energy research.
Fusion, like powering the sun.
Yep. The sheer desperation for clean, limitless power to feed these AI models is actually accelerating investment in next-generation physical sciences.
That is wild. And it isn't just the power generation, it's the physical hardware too, right? The silicon itself.
The chips.
Yeah. The semiconductor industry is absolutely booming in this brief. Semiconductor manufacturing investment is highlighted as a massive pillar supporting industrial growth. And these companies are attracting heavy investor interest.
Because it takes mountains of physical silicon to make the digital cloud float.
Right.
And look at how the capital is moving. Investors in 2026 are specifically favoring companies with sustainable AI strategies.
What does that mean in practice?
It means if a CEO stands up on an earnings call and says, "We are deploying AI across our entire company," the market's response is no longer to just blindly cheer.
You want the receipts.
Exactly. The market's response is, show us your energy contracts, show us your cooling technology, show us your semiconductor supply chain.
Because if you can't power it, it's just a pipe dream.
Right. Long-term energy planning and the digital economy are now completely, inextricably intertwined.
Okay, so we've mapped out the technology, the invisible plumbing of AI, and we've mapped out the immense physical power, the baseload electricity, and the silicon needed to run it.
The macro view.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But let's bring this down from the macro infrastructure to the micro human level. Because while all these data centers are humming away and utilities are sweating to balance the grid, regular people are just waking up on a Thursday in July, drinking their coffee and going to work.
And that transition from the macro system to the individual human experience is really where the friction happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to say the economy is optimized. It's another to ask how an optimized AI-driven world actually feels to the real people trying to survive in it.
Well, let's look at a stark contrast in our sources because it's actually quite jarring. Up in the cloud, you have AI perfectly optimizing data streams and, discovering pharmaceuticals. But down in the dirt, human reality is as messy as it has ever been.
Messy is a good word for it.
Right. For instance, the brief mentions some archived geopolitical headlines from earlier in the year. In May 2026, there was a tentative U.S.-Iran agreement regarding the Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, a massive choke point for global oil and shipping.
A very volatile region.
Exactly. And then in June 2026, federal authorities uncovered a literally 2,000-foot drug tunnel connecting Mexico to the U.S.
It is a brilliant contrast to look at. And again, we are entirely neutral on the politics of those specific events, but functionally, they tell a profound story about this era.
What's the takeaway there?
You have quantum computing research and multimodal AI progressing in the exact same world where physical subterranean tunnels are being dug by hand across international borders.
With shovels and pickaxes.
Right. It proves that no matter how much we optimize our digital infrastructure, our physical borders, our resource needs, and our human conflicts remain entirely unautomated.
The human element is still just raw and unpredictable. And we see that volatility everywhere in the market data. The sources describe global economic activity as resilient, but they're very explicit that uncertainty persists.
People are still nervous.
Yeah. Gold is continuing to reflect geopolitical caution. And, people usually buy gold when they are nervous about the physical world.
It's the ultimate physical hedge.
Right. Ukraine and Russia are continuing military operations. NATO is maintaining close attention to European security. The geopolitical reality is chaotic, which is such a wild backdrop for an era defined by, quote, disciplined corporate execution.
It's a huge paradox. So how does an individual even navigate that?
Right. How do you live in that world?
They focus on adaptability. Let's look at the workplace data in the report. Hybrid work patterns remain stable, so society seems to have found a kind of truce between the office and the living room after all the whiplash of the early 2020s.
We finally settled into a rhythm.
Yes, but the mechanics of how people get hired are undergoing a major shift. The sources state that skills-based hiring is expanding rapidly.
Expanding rapidly.
Yeah.
So why skills over, say, traditional degrees? Is it just because the technology is moving too fast for a traditional 4-year curriculum to keep up?
That is the primary driver, absolutely. Think about it. If you spend 4 years getting a degree in a specific coding language, and an AI assistant completely changes the paradigm of that language in year 3.
Then your degree is out of date before you even graduate.
Exactly. Your degree is suddenly far less relevant. Employers in 2026 care far less about the pedigree of where you learned something and far more about your proven ability to execute a task using the current tools.
Which ties directly into another really key finding here. Continuous learning is now cited as a major competitive advantage. You can't just learn a software program once in your 20s and coast on that knowledge for a decade.
You really can't, because the baseline of productivity is just constantly rising. If your coworker is using a multimodal AI agent to do their job twice as fast, you have to adapt to that tool just to keep your head above water.
You have to keep up.
But, and this is a really crucial distinction in the sources, this technology is largely being framed and deployed as an assistant, not a wholesale human replacement.
Yes. And we see that dynamic mirrored perfectly in the broader cultural updates from this July 9th brief.
The cultural stuff is fascinating.
It really is. The sources note that technology is complementing creative expression rather than replacing it. Like music production is increasingly incorporating AI tools, allowing independent creators to expand their reach and produce at a much higher quality without needing a massive studio budget.
It democratizes the execution of ideas.
Right, it levels the playing field.
A human still has to have the creative taste, the vision, the spark, the AI just handles the heavy lifting of the audio mixing or the complex video rendering.
And beyond the digital creation part, The fundamentally human experiences are actually thriving. You might think in a fully optimized digital world, everyone would just stay home with VR headsets all day.
But they aren't.
No. Summer travel is highly active. Live entertainment and concert attendance are incredibly healthy. Summer movie box offices are strong.
It just highlights a persistent, unyielding human desire for physical connection and shared, messy experience.
We still want to be around each other.
Exactly. No matter how advanced edge computing gets or how optimized the global supply chain becomes, people still fundamentally want to gather in a sweaty stadium and sing along to a song together.
Which perfectly explains why the World Cup is absolutely dominating global sports coverage in this snapshot and why podcast audiences remain incredibly massive.
People are still actively seeking out human voices, human stories, and shared cultural moments.
So what does this all mean? When you pull the camera all the way back, how do we make sense of a world that is heavily automated, where AI is actively managing regional power grids, yet we are still dealing with ancient human conflicts, digging border tunnels, and packing into stadiums for soccer games?
This raises an important question about the actual value of the human element.
Okay.
There was this profound fear that AI would make humans obsolete. But what we see in 2026 is that despite a massive AI boom, human factors are still the ultimate bottleneck. Look at the data. The sources specifically highlight a persistent, ongoing healthcare workforce shortage.
Because an AI can read an MRI scan faster than a human, but it can't hold a patient's hand or physically turn them in a hospital bed.
Precisely. AI can assist in the diagnostics, it can handle all the complex billing paperwork in seconds, but it cannot replace the physical care, the empathy, and the tactile judgment provided by a nurse.
It just can't do the physical world.
Right. Furthermore, there is a massive demand for skilled technical professionals to maintain all these physical systems. Human capital remains irreplaceable. The highly optimized systems of 2026 are still entirely dependent on the messy humans guiding them, maintaining the concrete infrastructure beneath them, and applying them to real-world problems.
That makes a lot of sense. So looking at the big picture, the mid-2026 landscape we've unpacked today, it's really held up by a few major pillars. First, we have the maturation of AI into boring, invisible, but absolutely essential infrastructure. We've moved past the magic of the glowing light bulb, and we are deep in the grueling process of standardizing the voltage and wiring the house.
Second, we saw that this digital shift has triggered a massive physical mobilization. You just cannot outcode physics. Utilities, the nuclear power sector, fusion researchers, and semiconductor manufacturers are all racing and frankly struggling to feed the immense energy demands of this new infrastructure.
And finally, global society is adapting to these powerful new tools without losing its fundamental human character. We're navigating a chaotic geopolitical map, but people are integrating AI into their daily work to boost their skills while still prioritizing live events, travel, and traditional human connections. It is a world intensely focused on disciplined execution. It is highly advanced, incredibly power-hungry, and surprisingly grounded in physical reality.
Which leaves us with a critical thought to consider as we close this out. We saw clearly in the data that skills-based hiring is expanding rapidly and that technology is actively complementing human creativity rather than replacing it.
Right.
So if we look toward this reality in a world where AI has achieved operational maturity, where it seamlessly handles the heavy lifting of coding, data processing, and routine administrative tasks, what uniquely human, irreplaceable skill are you cultivating today to ensure you thrive in this highly optimized economy?
That is exactly the question you need to be asking yourself. Because no matter how advanced and automated the house gets, it still needs someone who actually knows how to live in it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of 2026. We'll catch you next time.